Good morning, everyone. I have my coffee. It's Friday morning when I'm recording this, and I wanted to give you a little peek into my space. So I turned the camera around today, and you can see that I still have my Christmas tree up because I live in Wisconsin, where it's very cold and gray in the winter. And so we desperately cling to any reason to celebrate and feel festive. So I have my Christmas tree up and probably will keep it up as long as I can. And then on this side, you can see my ancestral altar over here. So I have a drawing of my maternal grandmother and grandfather and other sacred objects. And then behind me, you can see I have kind of a messy space, and that's because I'm also an artist and a therapist. So this is actually my home office where I have clients come for therapy, and I do art therapy with young people. So we do a lot of painting and crafting, and I'm actually working on this knitting right now, which is really fun. Um, and yeah, so today I wanted to talk about astrology and the modern paradigm. So, um, a couple personal notes before I talk about kind of the modern paradigm, what that means, and what that means for astrology. Um, and I wanted to share that my godmother, actually on my maternal line, um, my aunt, um, was an astrologer. She is still living, but she no longer practices. But she, when she was younger, discovered astrology and really was a powerful seer. And she really started gathering a following. And she actually experienced a lot of persecution and stigma and ostracism as a result of practicing astrology. And so the reason I bring this up is because this, of course, relates to a long lineage of violent repression and persecution, of ways of knowing that are outside of the rational, modern, Euro-Western paradigm. And for me, as I shared in the previous video, I grew up in a very agnostic household, very skeptical. And I am also, as I shared, I have 4 planets in Pisces, and Pisces is a very, very intuitive sign. My Mercury, I actually misspoke in the last video. My Mars isn't in Pisces, my Mercury is in Pisces. And Mercury represents the way we communicate and think. And Pisces thinks in abstracts. It's a very intuitive and not logical way of knowing. And so while I can do rationality and logic, oftentimes my ways of knowing are very intuitive. And that was always difficult for me because when I was growing up, I was a very intuitive, artistic, poetic child, and very deeply spiritual, even as a young child, and felt that I knew things that I couldn't prove. And I developed a lot of shame and stigma around my own intuitive ways of knowing and my just spiritual sense that that we are part of a larger intelligence and a larger matrix of meaning that is outside of this mechanical worldview. And when I started practicing astrology, I was actually very, well, on the one hand, I would do a lot of readings for people. I also professionally felt like this was something I had to hide. This was something that made me woo-woo, or that I would be dismissed or even persecuted for believing in astrology and really living a lot of my life by through practicing astrology. And over the last several years, 5 years maybe, things have really changed. Even the last 3 years. In 2018, I think I started an Instagram account where, because I was like, I want to start sharing more about astrology and my writing and channelings about astrology. And I actually didn't include my name or have it be able to be traced back to me at all, because I was literally that scared of being associated with astrology and how that would jeopardize my profession and my legitimacy as a therapist and as a thinker. And so over the last few years, I've really worked through a lot of that. And also simultaneously, the world has shifted where suddenly a lot of people are interested in astrology and, Channing Nicholas was somebody who I think really helped to bring astrology back into more credibility, and that there's this revival of interest in astrology. So the dominant paradigm in the West that arose out of European philosophy over the last 500 years emphasizes science, reason, objectivity. And within this worldview, only the physically measurable is real, right? And the formation and function of the cosmos are purely the consequence of a combination of physical mechanism and random chance. So within this worldview, there's really no larger meaning or purpose, and our existence is merely matter in motion. The universe is a grand machine, and only material dimensions and explanations are recognized and affirmed. So if we look at the conditions in Europe under which this modern paradigm came into being, we can see that there are economic self-interests that motivated this uplifting of objectivity and materialism at the expense of these other worldviews, which saw the non-human world, right? So land, water, air, plants, spirits, ancestors, as alive, as ensouled, as having an animated being. And within the modern worldview, which is connected with the idea of private property, right? Which private property made it necessary to have this kind of objectification and subordination of the non-human world. And also the objectification of human labor. So within this materialist paradigm, which David Corton calls the grand machine story, and Arturo Escobar calls it the one world. Vandana Shiva calls it the dead earth worldview. And I'll be talking a little bit more about each of those three and their kind of perspectives on the modern paradigm. So within this dead earth worldview, there's this binary that's created between humans and the natural world, right? So humans have agency, and the natural world, the non-human world, is objectified and stripped of agency. in order to justify ownership of land. And so out of this, the development of this de-spirited non-human world is connected with the market economy, the enclosure of the commons, and it brought in a new world order, which required this new paradigm, which justified private property and created this duality between mind and body, humans and nature, subjective, objective. And this paradigm is then assumed to be universal within the Euro-Western paradigm. There's an assumption that this is universal, neutral, and also superior. And then this, through the process of European colonization, this Western worldview has become the powerful dominant paradigm, has been violently imposed across the planet. And so this scientific paradigm, which assumes it assumes hegemonic legitimacy. It assumes that it's the only way, and it claims to be objective truth, and it invalidates all other worldviews based on their lack of material evidence within this paradigm. So worldviews that don't adhere to the materialist logic, perspectives that see the non-human world as having agency are then dismissed as unscientific. But so as David Corton points out, the biggest challenge to this mechanistic paradigm actually comes from science itself. It comes from quantum physics, which really troubles this mechanistic material view of reality and points to a much deeper and more complex reality. So with this mechanistic, de-spirited, disenchanted worldview, there's a loss of belonging that humans feel with the larger interdependent web of beings. And there's a resulting sense of alienation, which I spoke to in the previous video that I really experienced, this kind of terrifying loneliness, despair, and meaninglessness that comes from thinking of myself as this individual, atomized, disconnected being floating around in this in space. And so there's this confusion, alienation, a loss of a sense of agency, and all of this leads to out of control consumerism, individualism, narcissism, competition. And what is lost is a way of conceptualizing the world that that recognizes life's, as Corton says, extraordinary capacity for intelligent self-direction. And Arturo Escobar, in an article called Thinking, Feeling with the Earth, which I just love, even the title is impactful, describes some of the problems with this paradigm. And he says, we are facing modern paradigms for which there are no longer modern solutions. One may say that the crisis is the crisis of a particular world or set of world-making practices. The world that we usually refer to as the dominant form of Euro-modernity, capitalist, rationalist, liberal, secular, patriarchal, white. We will refer to this world as the one world world. That is a world allegedly made up of a single world and that has arrogated for itself the right to be the world, subjecting all other worlds to its own terms, or worse, to non-existence. This is a world where only one world fits. So with the globalization of the one world through colonization and imperialism, um, there is there's a loss, so much loss of so many worldviews, indigenous worldviews from all over the world that have been attempted to be completely destroyed, but haven't been completely destroyed, that may have, new solutions through thinking outside of this one world. Potentially there are a wellspring of solutions to some of these crises of modernism. And another person who talks about this modern paradigm is Vandana Shiva, who is an environmental justice activist and a scientist. And she talks about how the modern paradigm transformed the living earth into dead matter in order to facilitate the Industrial Revolution. And she calls it eco-apartheid. And she says that the illusion of separation between humans and nature is at the root of environmentally destructive behavior. And that this dead earth worldview has initiated or did initiate a war against the earth. So while we can acknowledge and think and value the observations of Western science for so many advancements in our understanding of the physical structures and processes of the world, this lack of a shared sacred story, as David Corton talks about, that's really more adequate to the needs of our time, leads us astray, right? It leads us to value money more than life, and to disrupt and deplete the generative systems of the Earth's living body. And so astrology can be one way of rethinking the world and to start thinking of ourselves as part of a living universe, so that we can really accept responsibility for the consequences of our personal choices. So part of, working with astrology, working with an understanding of the moon cycles, the natural wisdom of the earth, and the elements that are illustrated really in the complex language of astrology can help us to step outside of this dead earth worldview and to reclaim ways of living that are mutually enhancing, to develop a way of being in relationship with this larger interdependent web of life.